In this video, I want to tell you the most unbelievable story I've ever lived through. An experience that pulled me up from rock bottom and made me see that heaven can act when we least expect it. I was convicted of a crime I didn't commit, spent years behind bars, and when all hope was lost, something happened. Something no one could explain. A presence. A sign. A miracle. It all started with a simple request made days before my execution. And what happened next changed my life and the way I see faith. Forever. This is an intimate, true, and profoundly transformative story about courage, pain, faith, and liberation. Before we begin, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel, because every week we share real testimonies that strengthen faith and touch the hearts of those who watch. Also, activate the little bell so you don't miss the next videos. And do one more thing. Comment below which city or country you're watching us from. I love knowing how far these stories are reaching. May this story speak to your heart. I don't know if anyone can truly explain with words what it is like to await your own death. I'm not talking about the slow death of someone who is sick or aging. I'm talking about the one that has a date, time, and protocol. The one that arrives with a judge's signature, police escort, and silence in the corridor. I spent 6 years inside a cold cell, waiting for that moment. I was a nurse for almost a decade. I had a daughter, a simple house, an ordinary life. Until one night, at the hospital where I worked, everything turned to dust. A patient died during my shift. The medication that appeared on the report wasn't the one I had administered, but no one wanted to listen. The hospital cameras stopped working at that exact time. And in court, what mattered most was the surname of the man who died. I screamed my innocence until I lost my voice. And after so much time, I myself began to doubt if I would ever get my truth back. The date was set 2 months in advance. And even though I already knew this day would come, it felt like a dry punch to the chest. I didn't cry. I didn't react. I just shut down. I started counting the days like someone marking the end of a torture. But then, in the middle of that endless corridor, something happened. Something that completely messed up everything inside me. One Saturday morning, without warning, the guard called me, saying I had a visitor. I hadn't received anyone for over 2 years. When I walked into that room, my daughter was there, grown up, with eyes like mine, but carrying a pain I didn't even know still existed. She handed me a blue rosary. She said she prayed with it every day for me, that she always believed I was innocent. That broke me down. I held that rosary as if I were holding her hand, and that was where everything began to change. Even if I didn't yet know what was coming next. I took that rosary back to my cell as one takes a living letter. Not because I had faith. That part of me had been dead for a long time, but because it belonged to my daughter. And holding that rosary, it felt like I could feel the warmth of her hands. In the following days, I started sleeping with it under my pillow. Sometimes, I'd wake up in the middle of the night, sweating, heart pounding, and I'd hold those cold beads like someone desperately grasping for a thread of air. I didn't know how to pray anymore. I had forgotten, but the words still came, softly, confused, almost like a confession. "Help me not to be afraid," I would whisper, looking up at the cracked ceiling of the cell. I wasn't asking for salvation, not a miracle. Just that the fear wouldn't consume me entirely when the time came. And it was in this strange atmosphere, between despair and a silent peace I didn't understand, that the desire to see the prison chapel came to me. I didn't even know if it was allowed, but I asked. I spoke to the guard named Donna, who was always more human than the others. I told her I didn't want to make a call or ask for special food. I just wanted to see the image of the Virgin Mary that was in the chapel. She looked at me in surprise, as if that was something no one had ever requested before. But she said she would see what she could do. The next day, she returned and said they had authorized it. 15 minutes in the chapel, alone. I don't know what I expected to feel. I thought maybe I'd sit in silence looking at the image, not knowing what to say. But when I entered there, it was different. The light coming through the high little window illuminated the dust in the air, as if it were floating gold. The image of the Virgin was simple, worn at the edges, but possessed a serenity that paralyzed me. I sat on the first bench and just stayed there, and before I knew it, I was crying, not from sadness. It was as if my soul was leaking out through my eyes. On that bench, with my eyes full of water and the rosary clutched between my fingers, I said softly, what I didn't even know still lived inside me. I don't want to leave afraid. That was all. I didn't ask for justice. I didn't beg for a miracle. I just wanted to be able to breathe until the end without falling apart. As I spoke, I noticed my hands were trembling. And in that instant, for the first time in 6 years, I felt heard. I can't explain it. There was no voice, no sound, no vision, but it was as if there was someone there with me, something that enveloped me inside and out, as if the air had changed density. A presence, invisible, but vivid. I stayed there until the guard knocked on the door. Your time is up, Sophia. I left the chapel still with tears on my face, but with a strangely calm heart. And that, coming from me, was almost a miracle. That night, something shifted. I lay down on the thin concrete bed as I always did, but the heavy weight on my chest was gone. The fear was still there, but it seemed smaller. I picked up the rosary, closed my eyes, and only remember repeating mentally, "Thank you for listening to me." It was almost 2 a.m. when it happened. I wasn't sleeping, I'm sure. I was looking at the ceiling, awake. Suddenly, the atmosphere of the cell changed. The air became warm but not stifling. It was a comforting heat, like when you step into a candle-lit room after being out in the cold for a long time. And then came the light. It wasn't from the ceiling lamp, which was yellow and flickered. It was a golden soft light that originated in a corner of the cell and spread slowly, as if it were making a way. I sat up on the bed, unable to blink. My heart pounded, but not out of fear. It was as if I was facing something that didn't belong in the world I knew. It was then that I saw. I'm not talking about a shadow or something in my head. I saw. In the middle of that light, there was a woman standing in the corner of the cell. She didn't say a word. She didn't move. But she was there, with a simple white dress, a light blue mantle over her shoulders, and her hands slightly extended, as if welcoming me. Her face. I have never seen a face so serene, so full of peace. It was not human, not from this world. This was not a dream, nor a hallucination. It was too real. The silence in that moment seemed to have a different sound, a sound that is not heard with the ears. I felt that she knew everything about me, every pain, every regret, every time I stayed silent swallowing the injustice. She knew, and yet she was there, present in a way that no one had ever been with me. It was as if she was saying with her eyes, "You are not alone." And then came the smell. All of a sudden, the entire cell was filled with the fragrance of fresh roses. There were no flowers inside, just concrete, iron, and a thin mattress. But the smell was so strong and so sweet that it seemed impossible. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and felt as if something was cleansing everything I carried. The resentment, the hatred, the despair, all of it was leaving me as if its expiration date had passed. I started crying again, but it was different this time. It was a cry of relief. of someone who finally manages to let go of a weight they carried without knowing how. The woman remained standing, looking at me with that same calm gaze. And in that instant, I didn't want answers. I didn't want justice. I only wanted to stay there, with her, in that moment, forever. Because in that instant I truly knew, that God had not forgotten me. I don't know how long it lasted. It might have been a minute or an eternity. I only know that, slowly, that light began to disappear. Not abruptly, but as if it were being gently withdrawn. The figure of the woman faded along with the brightness, and the perfume of the roses became weaker, until it vanished completely. When everything darkened again, the cell seemed larger, emptier. But inside me, something was different. I leaned back against the wall, the rosary still in my hands, without saying a word. The tears kept falling, but it was as if I was at peace. A peace I had never felt before. That night, I slept. It wasn't that broken sleep full of nightmares. It was a deep sleep. I woke up when the guard was making her rounds and she asked me why the entire cell smelled of flowers. I just smiled and said, "I don't know." And I remained silent, as if that secret no longer belonged to this world. The next day, something even more unbelievable happened. Around 9 a.m, when I was already being prepared for the final procedures, the prison warden rushed into the room, her face distraught. She called me by name, like someone carrying heavy news, but in a hurry to relieve the burden. She said that a nurse from the hospital where I worked had spontaneously turned herself in to the police that same morning. She confessed that it was she who administered the wrong medication to the patient, and that she manipulated the records, afraid of being fired. She brought documents, signed a statement, and provided evidence. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked, "But why now?" The warden took a deep breath and said, "She had an emotional breakdown last night. She said she couldn't live with the guilt anymore, that something happened to her and made her realize she couldn't let you die for something you didn't do." I was in shock. I felt my legs give out. I sat on the floor, the rosary still in my hands. And for the first time, I didn't cry from sadness. I cried from incredulity, something that defied logic. That couldn't be explained. The warden said that my case would be immediately reopened, and that, with the new evidence, it would only be a matter of time before my sentence was overturned. But to me, none of it felt real. My mind was still stuck on the night before, trying to understand what had happened. So many things at once. It seemed like an impossible script. But it was my life. After she left the room, I was alone for a few minutes. I closed my eyes, rested my head against the cold wall, and took a deep breath. I didn't feel relief or joy. It was something else. It was a silence within me, as if everything was finally in its place. I couldn't explain it. I could only hold the rosary tightly and give thanks without words. Because deep down, I knew. This whole thing was not a coincidence. It was a response that came when everything had already been given up for lost. In the following weeks, everything happened very quickly. The nurse who confessed was called to testify. The lawyers mobilized. The documents were submitted to the prosecution. And 20 days after that dawn, that was almost my last, I walked out the prison gate as a free woman. My daughter was waiting for me outside. When she saw me, she ran without a second thought and hugged me as if she wanted to glue the lost years back together. I didn't say anything. I just hugged her back, tightly, like someone who will never let go. She kept repeating softly, "I knew she would hear you, Mom. I knew." And I believed her. Because in that moment, there was no doubt. It didn't matter if someone outside thought it was an exaggeration, a coincidence, or madness. I lived it. I felt it, and I was saved, in a way that no explanation can account for, and no one will ever take that from me. In the months that followed, my life became a slow process of reconstruction. I moved into a small house, far from everything that reminded me of pain. It wasn't pretty or new, but it was mine. I would wake up and go to sleep with the window open just to feel the wind truly coming in, after so many years trapped in the same smell of mold and iron. My daughter came to visit me every weekend. We talked about silly things, watched repeat movies, ate microwave popcorn as if it were a feast. And in these simple moments, I felt that something was returning to its place. Not everything, because there are scars that don't disappear. I still woke up some nights thinking I was in the cell. I still caught myself looking at the ceiling, waiting to hear the sound of the rounds, but they were just echoes. And slowly, they got fainter. One day, tidying up some boxes I hadn't even opened since leaving prison, I found the blue rosary. It was there, in a torn envelope, with the beads a little worn and the crucifix bent. I picked it up in my hands and stood still for several minutes, just looking. That was not just an object. It was the thread that pulled me back when I was already drowning. I held it tight, closed my eyes, and felt as if everything returned for an instant. The chapel, the smell of roses, that light that enveloped me. I didn't tell anyone this part, not even my daughter. Not because I'm ashamed, but because it's difficult to explain something that logic cannot grasp. People ask, "But did you really see her?" And I reply, "I felt her." Because that's what it was. A presence that went right through me. A certainty that was born in the midst of the end. And that to this day lives inside me without needing any proof. There was one morning in particular that I will never forget. It was a Saturday. The sun had just come out, and the sky was clear. That kind of blue you only see after a very dark night. My daughter invited me to walk in a park near the house. I accepted. We walked slowly, without rushing, just talking about simple things. She was talking about a school project, the new teacher, and I just listened, happy to be there, hearing her voice, watching her hair sway in the wind. Until, suddenly, I stopped. Beside the path, there was a small flower bed with dozens of pink rose bushes. They were in bloom, full, perfect. The smell was the same as in the cell. Out of nowhere, that entire moment came back to me. The extended hands, the warm light, the peace. I bent down, brought my face close to one of the flowers, and breathed deeply. It was as if she had found me again. My daughter looked at me worriedly and asked if I was okay. I just shook my head and said yes. But inside I was trembling. Not from fear. It was a different kind of shiver. As if someone had just passed by me, just to remind me that I was not alone. And in that moment, I understood one thing I had never stopped to think about. That encounter didn't happen just to pull me from death. It happened to wake me up, to show me that even within the worst of places, with everything against me, it was still possible to be seen, to be heard, to be loved. Her presence in that cell did not erase the 6 years of pain, but it gave them a new meaning. Because I left there with more than freedom. I left with faith, a faith that no longer depends on a crowded church or beautiful words. It is a raw faith, born within the pain, and precisely because of that, impossible to break. Some people close to me started telling me I should tell this story somewhere, that I should write, record a video, give an interview. But I never could. Not because I'm afraid of judgment, but because I feel that this type of experience cannot be conveyed in words. It's like trying to describe a smell to someone who has never smelled it, or explaining a pain that isn't physical, but isn't imaginary either. I'm talking about it here now because I feel that maybe, just maybe, someone is needing to read this. Someone who has given up on the idea of being heard, who thinks they are forgotten even by God. and I wanted to say with all the truth in me, "You are not." I thought I was too, for years. And yet, in that tiny, moldy room, where no one would ever imagine that something sacred could happen, she came. Today I look back and realize how much life can change in the blink of an eye. Sometimes we expect God to speak with thunder, to fix everything with magic, to pull us out of the hole with a snap of the fingers. But it's not always like that. Sometimes he sends a daughter with a rosary in her hands. Sometimes he waits until the last moment to show that he was always there. And the craziest thing about all this is that if I had been released earlier, if the truth had appeared in the first or second year, I would never have experienced that. I would never have felt that presence. I would never have been broken and put back together inside. It was at rock bottom that he found me. And it was there that I discovered that my faith no longer depended on what I saw or understood. Because now I knew. And once you know, there's no turning back. After everything passed, I tried to go back to work. It wasn't easy. The history still weighs, even with the acquittal. Some look with suspicion. Others think they know what happened better than I do. But I took it slowly. I managed to get a position at a small community hospital, one of those where no one is treated like a number. At first I was apprehensive. I was afraid of making a mistake, of freezing up in the middle of a treatment, of having an unexpected trigger. But with every patient I helped, it was as if a part of me was being restored. I started smiling genuinely inside a hospital again. I started looking at myself in the mirror with more compassion. And I started feeling that I had something to offer. What happened to me was not erased, but it stopped being my prison. It became part of my story. And even when no one mentions it, I carry that moment within me like someone carrying something sacred. I never saw that light again. I never felt that strong smell of roses again. I never had such a direct experience as that night. And sometimes I confess, I catch myself wanting it again. Just one more time. But then I realize that maybe that only happened because I needed it. And today, I know I'm no longer in that place. The faith that remained is quieter, more mature. It shows itself in the details, in a tight hug, in a whispered prayer before sleep, in an unexplainable moment of peace. I still have the rosary. It stays in the bedside drawer. And every now and then, when everything seems too confusing, I take it in my hand, close my eyes, and remember. Not the fear, but the presence, the warmth, the certainty that, in that instant, in the worst possible place, I was visited by something greater than anything this world can explain. Every now and then I receive a message from someone who heard about what happened, even vaguely, and they ask me, "Do you think it was the Virgin Mary, really?" And I always pause before answering, because I can't prove it with photos or recordings or witnesses. There is none of that. There is only my word. And my word is, yes. I don't just think so. I know. I saw. I felt. And as much as this challenges any rational explanation, I don't need to convince anyone, because the experience was not meant to be exhibited. It was meant to transform me. And that's what it did. In place of anger, there remained a kind of gratitude that accompanies me to this day. A kind of certainty that doesn't come from the brain, but from somewhere deeper. A living memory that, because it is so real, sometimes even hurts. I don't want anyone to think that my life turned into a fairy tale after this. I still have anxiety attacks. I still have difficulty trusting some people. I still silently revolt when I remember everything I lost. But even in these moments, there is a part of me that remains standing. A part that is no longer shaken by what would have brought me down before. Because I have already been to the place where everything seemed lost. And it was there that I found the answer my soul didn't even know it was seeking. I'm not here to tell anyone what they should believe. But if there's one thing I know, and that maybe you need to hear right now. It's this: heaven does not forget us, even when everything says the opposite, even when time passes and nothing changes, even when we stop asking. Help comes, in a way no one expects, but it comes. I was never the type to get emotional easily. I was always practical, down to earth, one of those who believe more in what they can touch than in what they can't explain. Maybe that's why it took me so long to accept that all of it had been real, that it wasn't the result of my desperation or my exhausted mind. But today, with enough distance, I understand. That visit was not meant to be understood. It was meant to be lived. It was a gift, a presence, something that didn't come to forcefully remove me from there, but to remind me that even at the end of the line, I was still seen, still a daughter, and that God's love does not depend on our human justice, nor our deserving. It simply is. It simply comes. When He wants. And often, when we least expect it. I've been asked if I would go back in time if I could. If I would choose to erase everything and avoid that imprisonment, that suffering, that pain. For a long time, I said yes. That I would give anything not to have gone through that. But today, I don't know anymore, because it was there, on that cold floor, in that filthy cell, that I was touched by something that changed everything. Not just my destiny, but my soul. Some people live their whole lives without experiencing for even a second the sensation of being enveloped by a peace that does not belong to this world. I lived that, in the worst moment, in the worst place. And that's why, when they ask me if I forgave, I answer yes. Not because it was easy, but because after living what I lived, I can't carry hate anymore. It simply doesn't fit. There was a moment, weeks after my release, when I caught myself alone, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring into space. The sun was coming through the window with that orange tone of late afternoon, and for an instant, I felt it. Again. That presence. Not like before, not with light or perfume, but a silence that embraces, a certainty without words. And that gave me such intense peace that I just closed my eyes and let the tears fall. No one saw. No one needs to see. Because now I understand that some experiences are just between you and heaven. They are messages left deep in the soul for you to carry for the rest of your life. And the most beautiful thing is that no one can take that away from you. Ever. I don't know why that happened to me. I don't think I'm any more special than anyone else. I didn't make a promise, didn't complete a novena, didn't fast. I was just broken. Alone. At the end. Maybe that's precisely why. Maybe heaven appears when there is nothing left, to show that He is everything. Since that day, I continue living. Quietly, simply, with the ups and downs of anyone. But with a secret inside my chest that no one understands. And they don't need to understand. Because I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And no matter how much everything has returned to normal outside, inside me, it was never the same again. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you for listening to me. Everything I've lived has taught me one thing. Even when everything seems lost, God can act in ways we don't even imagine. And if my story touched your heart in some way, I ask you, leave your opinion here in the comments, or share a moment in your life when you also felt heaven reached you. And go ahead and subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. That way you won't miss any testimony like this. Every week we bring real stories that nourish faith, renew hope, and show that miracles still happen. If you like this content and want to help us continue spreading these messages, click the join button below. It's a simple, but very special way to support this work and be part of this mission with me. Oh, and stay tuned. The next video that will appear on your screen brings another strong and transformative testimony that will surely move you. God bless you. See you in the next video.